Let's be honest, if you're running a construction company or managing projects, you've likely felt the squeeze.
Hmm.
Projects taking longer than planned, budgets ballooning, and communication breakdowns that feel like they cost you real money.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking about those errors that keep you up at night, the duplicated efforts that make you scratch your head, and the overhead that just eats away at your bottom line.
Yeah, these aren't just minor annoyances. They really hit the bottom line hard. They impact your profitability, your reputation, everything.
Absolutely. And it's a common story across the industry, isn't it? From smaller contractors to the really big firms.
It really is. The complexity of managing all the different trades, the timelines, stakeholders, it often leads to these exact same pain points.
But what if there was a more streamlined way to tackle these challenges? Today, we're diving deep into process management.
Okay.
It's a kind of lean methodology that looks at your entire construction operation or maybe a specific project as a connected system, not just, isolated tasks.
Right. It's about understanding how each step really impacts the next one.
Instead of seeing estimating over here, site work over there, and final walkthroughs somewhere else entirely.
Exactly, like separate silos. Process management helps you see the crucial links between them. And, when one area falters, it creates this ripple effect across the entire project or even your whole company.
And that's where our deep dive comes in today. We're looking at how a massive, multi-billion-dollar construction project,
You.
true giant, yeah, broken down into three major blocks, 19 individual projects, how they successfully implemented process management during the closeout phase.
And we've got a paper detailing their whole approach, right?
We do, and our mission here is to pull out those crucial lessons that hopefully you can apply right now to your own construction company, no
Mhm.
matter the size, to boost efficiency and, well, improve your project outcomes.
Okay, so let's start by maybe digging into why these problems, the delays, the cost overruns, the communication gaps, why are they so common in construction? The paper we're looking at really highlights the traditional, often deeply ingrained, siloed nature of the business.
Okay, when we say siloed, what does that practically mean for a construction company day to day, like on the ground?
Well, think about the typical structure, right? Your pre-construction team, they might operate largely on their own, separate from field management.
Right.
Accounting often functions in its own sphere.
Hmm.
Then you layer in subcontractors, the main contractors, designers, and of course the owners or clients.
Mm-hmm.
Information doesn't always flow freely between these groups. They often have different priorities, maybe don't fully grasp how their work impacts everyone else down the line.
It's like different teams building walls instead of bridges between each other.
That's a good way to put it. And as the paper points out, this lack of fluid communication and, frankly, genuine collaboration has some pretty significant negative consequences for construction companies.
Like what specifically?
Well, precisely those things we started with. Projects that consistently run behind schedule and over budget.
Okay.
These silos also create fertile ground for errors.
Yeah.
Errors that maybe could have been easily avoided if the right information had just reached the right people at the right time.
Makes sense.
When you have so many stakeholders kind of operating in their own bubbles, it's almost inevitable that things will fall through the cracks.
It's interesting because the paper contrasts this with other industries, right? Industries that have successfully adopted these lean production systems. What fundamental shifts did those industries make?
Yeah, what's fascinating there is the emphasis on a shared understanding. Everyone gets the overarching mission.
Okay.
In these more integrated industries, every single team member understands how their individual contribution directly affects the final product or service. There's a strong culture of open communication between anyone involved in a particular process.
Crucial.
And crucially, robust systems are in place for providing feedback and support when someone hits a snag, an obstacle.
And what's the payoff been for those industries? What kind of results do they actually see from doing this?
Well, the results are pretty compelling.
Yeah.
Significantly higher productivity, for one, reduced overhead, often doing more with the same or even fewer resources,
Wow.
and a dramatic decrease in costly errors.
Hmm.
The paper sort of suggests that while construction has historically been maybe resistant to this level of integration,
Yeah.
adopting a process-oriented view within your own construction company isn't just a nice-to-have anymore. It's becoming pretty essential for staying competitive and delivering consistent, high-quality results.
Which brings us right to the heart of it, this $9 billion mega project closeout. $9 billion. That's just a staggering number.
It really is.
And structured into three distinct blocks, 19 individual projects, each with its own team, its own deadlines, all feeding into the bigger block deadline. The complexity. It sounds almost impossible to manage.
It was an incredibly complex undertaking, no doubt, and the success of that closeout phase really hinged on the deliberate implementation of this process management model. The paper highlights several core principles that form the foundation.
Okay, let's get down to the specifics then. What were the key kind of non-negotiable elements of this process management approach they used?
Right. First and foremost, crystal clear objectives for every single stakeholder involved. Everyone needed an unambiguous understanding of the final goal.
Clarity. Got it.
Second, assigning clear accountability for the efficiency and effectiveness of the entire closeout process to a designated process owner.
One owner for the whole thing.
One owner. And third, and this is maybe the most important for fostering that culture of continuous improvement in any construction company, empowering individuals at all levels to identify and propose solutions for process improvements.
So bottom-up ideas too.
Exactly. And underpinning all of this was a strong emphasis on open communication and seamless collaboration to truly integrate the people, the processes they followed, and the technology they were using.
Okay, and in this huge mega project scenario, who actually took on that crucial role of the overall process owner?
That responsibility fell squarely on the closeout team itself.
Yeah.
Their mandate was basically to maintain a holistic view of the entire closeout process.
Okay.
And their responsibilities were pretty wide-ranging. They had to proactively make sure all stakeholders knew what needed to happen before their tasks, during their tasks, and after their specific tasks were done.
So connecting the dots for everyone.
Think of them as the central coordinators, yeah, making sure every moving part was synchronized.
So they were essentially making sure everyone knew the plan, what their role was, preventing those costly overlaps or maybe gaps in the work. What else did this closeout team do to keep such a massive project on track?
Well, they played a really vital role in helping each employee understand not just their individual tasks, but how those tasks contributed to the bigger picture.
Yeah, the why.
Exactly. And critically, how their work impacted the work of others down the line. They actively educated employees on that potential domino effect, showing how a delay in one seemingly small area could cascade and hold up the entire closeout.
Right, because it always does.
It always does. And they didn't just talk about it. They actively fostered direct communication between individuals whose tasks were directly linked.
So instead of just relying on layers of emails and hoping the message got through,
Right.
they were encouraging people to, what, pick up the phone, walk over and talk directly to the person who needed their input or whose work depended on theirs.
Exactly that. And their focus wasn't solely on tasks and timelines either. The closeout team also prioritized building and maintaining positive rapport, positive relationships with everyone involved.
That interpersonal stuff matters.
It really does. The paper even suggests that having individuals with strong interpersonal skills on this team was absolutely crucial for building trust and making people feel comfortable raising potential issues.
Yeah, because nobody wants to be the bearer of bad news if they feel like they'll just get shot down, right? Creating that psychological safety net sounds so important.
Absolutely critical.
Hmm.
They were also constantly monitoring the progress of all the various closeout tasks, staying informed about any emerging challenges, and proactively communicating updates to keep the entire process moving forward.
So active monitoring.
Very active. It sounds like they were continuously checking in with different teams, maybe gently reminding them of upcoming deadlines for specific subcontracts or documentation, essentially acting as that proactive nudge to keep things on schedule.
So they weren't just passively observing from afar. They were actively involved in facilitating progress, removing roadblocks when they popped up.
Precisely. And their involvement went beyond just the core project teams.
Yeah.
They actively engaged with a whole range of other departments that had a stake in the closeout.
Like who?
Departments responsible for things like LED certification, sales taxes, diversity compliance, risk management, accounting, all of them.
Okay, the support functions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They really took the time to understand the specific processes within each of these departments and figure out how all the various pieces needed to align for a successful closeout. They even used what the paper calls a pull technique to meticulously map out the handoffs between these different departments.
A pull technique. Okay, can you break that down? How would that resonate with someone running, say, a mid-sized construction company?
Sure. Think of it like this. Instead of just pushing your completed work downstream and kind of hoping the next team is ready for it.
Which happens all the time.
It happens all the time. The pull technique involves looking at what the downstream team needs, what the next person in the process needs, and working backward to make sure they get it exactly when they need it and in the format they need it.
Ah,
So for example, instead of the site team just, dumping a closeout package on accounting's desk, they would first proactively talk to accounting, understand their specific documentation requirements for final payment, and then make sure they're providing exactly that.
so it's driven by the needs of the next step.
Exactly. That proactive communication, driven by the needs of the next stage in the process, that's the core of the pull approach.
That makes a lot of sense for pretty much any construction process, preventing those back and forth delays because something was missing or wrong.
Exactly right.
Yeah.
And in this mega project, they literally mapped out the entire closeout process. The scale was just immense. They documented over 7,500 contractual requirements.
7,500.
Yeah. Everything from O&M manuals and warranties to as-built drawings, even spare parts lists, training schedules. Plus, they mapped out all the field activities, system startups, testing, inspections, punch lists, and all the financial activities, too. Closing out those 900 subcontracts, verifying diversity requirements, final accounting, risk verification, processing final payments, the whole 9 yards.
7,500 individual requirements. That level of detail? It's almost hard to wrap your head around. How did they even begin to manage that sheer volume of information?
Well, the foundation was setting those crystal clear goals, in this case, 100% completion of all those requirements.
It's ambitious.
Very. Establishing realistic timelines was key, too, and fostering that culture where everyone felt okay, felt empowered to openly communicate any potential roadblocks they saw coming. This detailed process mapping gave everyone a clear understanding of how their little piece fit into the big picture, that overarching goal.
Okay.
And the paper makes a really crucial point here for our listeners. They achieved this massive improvement in efficiency and collaboration with minimal changes to the existing processes within each department.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, the main focus was on enhancing communication and collaboration between departments, not totally overhauling how each individual team did their day-to-day work.
So they didn't try to reinvent the wheel everywhere. They just focused on making sure all the existing wheels were turning in sync and talking to each other effectively. Now, all of this sounds very internally focused, the project team, the various internal departments. How did they extend this process management thinking to external parties, particularly the project owner?
Yeah, that's a critical piece.
Hmm.
The closeout team took a very proactive stance with the project owner, significantly ahead of when the closeout phase would typically even start.
Way in advance.
Way in advance, yeah. They provided the owner with a comprehensive, super detailed list of every single deliverable that would eventually be handed over at the project's completion.
Okay, so no surprises at the end. Instead of dumping a mountain of documents on the owner right at the finish line, they were providing transparency and setting expectations really early on.
Exactly. This gave the owner a clear early heads up on what to expect and allowed them plenty of time to prepare on their end. And what's more, the owner actually played an active role.
How so?
They convened meetings with representatives from all the involved parties to clearly explain this new closeout process and really stress the importance of everyone working together collaboratively for a smooth handover.
So the owner became an active partner in the strategy, reinforcing that need to break down silos, even between the project team and the client themselves.
Precisely. The big goal was to prevent any communication silos forming with external parties, just like they were trying to do internally. By keeping communication consistent, transparent, and addressing any issues right away, they aimed to completely avoid those chaotic, last-minute scrambles that often plague closeouts and, can really strain client relationships.
Now, a project of this scale, they must have relied heavily on technology to manage all that information, right? Those 7,500 requirements.
They did. They used their existing project management system, but they strategically adapted it specifically for the unique demands of this closeout process.
How did they adapt it?
Well, they meticulously inputted that massive list of 7,500 requirements into the system. Then they customized it to track the status of contracts, the completion of each individual requirement, and the progress of inspections, all in real time.
Ah, real-time visibility.
Exactly. This gave the closeout team this centralized, up-to-the-minute view of the status of every single piece of the project, what was done, what was still outstanding, and crucially, where any potential bottlenecks might be starting to emerge.
So the project management system became kind of the central nervous system for the whole closeout operation, providing that essential visibility across all the moving parts.
In a way, yes. But the paper makes an important distinction here. Even with this powerful tech in place, the closeout team still prioritized direct person-to-person communication with employees.
Ah, the human element.
Yes, to ensure genuine engagement and understanding. It wasn't just about passively monitoring data on a screen. They were actively fostering dialogue and collaboration.
It sounds like they struck a really effective balance, leveraging technology for the tracking and the visibility, but maintaining that crucial human touch through direct communication.
Exactly. And to give leadership that high-level overview, they set up an executive dashboard. It displayed key progress indicators, allowed senior management to quickly spot any tasks that were stalled or maybe at risk, and then ensure proactive follow-up happened to get things moving again.
Let's delve deeper into that high touch aspect, the communication piece. The paper keeps coming back to it as a cornerstone of the whole project's success.
Absolutely. The closeout team actively worked to cultivate an environment of trust. You know,
Yeah.
open communication where employees felt genuinely comfortable raising concerns
Concerns about what?
about potential inefficiencies, roadblocks they saw coming, even perceived mistakes, without that fear of, getting blamed. They understood that catching problems early is absolutely crucial for solving them effectively.
That's so important. If your team feels like they can't speak up when they see something going slightly wrong, those small issues can just snowball into major headaches down the road.
Precisely. And they actively pushed for face-to-face communication whenever it was feasible, rather than just relying solely on email chains or, phone tag.
Why face to face?
Their thinking was that direct interaction is often just more efficient. It reduces the potential for misunderstandings that can easily creep into written text, and it helps build stronger working relationships too.
Yeah, it's harder for nuance to get lost, isn't it? And for misinterpretations to happen when you're actually having a direct conversation.
Exactly right. And this strong emphasis on collaboration actually ended up fostering a culture of innovation, interestingly enough.
How so?
Well, because team members had that clear understanding of the big goals and how their individual work fit in, they felt empowered to suggest practical solutions to challenges they ran into in their daily work.
Ah, so they felt ownership.
Yes. And the closeout team actively sought feedback from the people directly involved in the process, recognizing that they often had the most valuable insights into how things could be improved.
So the solutions weren't just being dictated from the top down, they were being kind of co-created by the people actually doing the work, leading to more effective, more practical outcomes. Now, the paper mentions this closeout process took 2 years. That's a long time.
It is a significant duration.
How did they maintain momentum and keep everyone aligned over such a long stretch?
Continuous training was a really vital component. They provided ongoing training sessions, both for new team members who inevitably joined the project over those 2 years, and also for existing team members.
What kind of training?
It was about consistently reinforcing the importance of the processes they'd established, making sure everyone knew how to properly use the project management system, and hammering home the value of clear, consistent communication. And crucially, they always connected the training back to the why.
Always back to the purpose.
Always. Clearly explaining how each individual's role and sticking to the process contributed directly to the overall success of this massive project.
Reinforcing that sense of purpose, showing people how their work fits into the larger picture. That's so key for keeping motivation and buy-in high, especially over a long-term project like that. Now, even with all this meticulous planning, this focus on communication, I bet there were still some unexpected hurdles along the way. The paper does mention some unforeseen challenges they hit.
Yes, absolutely. A couple of significant ones did surface. One key issue was actually a limitation within their existing project management system.
Oh, what was the limitation?
It was primarily designed just to report when a task was fully 100% complete. It didn't really track the various interim steps effectively, especially within multi-stage approval processes.
Ah, so it couldn't show in progress very well?
Exactly. And this lack of visibility into those in-progress tasks made it look like some items were stalled when, in reality, they were actually moving through the approval workflow just fine.
Yeah, that could definitely lead to some unnecessary follow-ups, maybe create a false sense of alarm.
It did. However, the closeout team really showed their adaptability here. They actively solicited feedback from the employees who were using the system every day,
Listening to the users.
listening to the users. And based on that feedback, they worked to modify the executive dashboard to actually include tracking of all those intermediate steps in the approval processes.
Yeah.
That gave a much clearer, much more accurate picture of the actual progress.
Good fix. What was the other challenge?
The other notable one was the persistence of that siloed mentality among some individuals.
Ah, the resistance.
Yeah, some people were initially resistant to fully adopting the new integrated processes and the level of information sharing that was required.
Old habits die hard, right? Especially in an industry with really established ways of working.
They certainly can. But the Closeout team proactively addressed this resistance. They consistently reiterated the overarching project goals, continuously emphasized why transparent information sharing was so critical, and stressed the need for timely escalation of any emerging problems. They really maintained a strong commitment to a continuous improvement mindset, constantly evaluating how effective the processes were and making necessary tweaks based on ongoing feedback and what they were observing.
The paper also touches on something that's, well, a perennial challenge in construction, managing subcontractors effectively, especially that difficulty of getting final completion documents after they've received their final payment. How did this process management model tackle that very common pain point?
Yeah, this was flagged as a significant potential risk area, and they put in place a pretty clear and firm policy to mitigate it.
What was the policy?
The core of their solution was mandating that subcontractors would only be eligible for their final payment after all the required checklist items were fully completed and had received the necessary approvals from all the relevant departments within the project team.
Ah, tying final payment directly to completion and approval.
Exactly. It created a very direct, very effective incentive for subcontractors to fulfill all their contractual obligations and submit all the required documentation on time.
So no final sign-offs and documents submitted, no final check gets cut. That's a pretty powerful motivator, I'd imagine, to ensure compliance.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
The process involved a multi-stage approval system. It required sign-offs not just from the direct project team, but also from those relevant support departments we mentioned. The paper even mentions that final sign-offs from the executive vice president and the CFO were required for closing out the vast majority of those subcontracts.
High-level oversight.
Very high level. Now, the paper does acknowledge that even this robust system wasn't entirely foolproof in every single instance. A very small number of subcontractors did manage to somehow slip through the cracks.
It happens.
It does. But the Closeout team learned from those isolated cases and significantly increased their direct involvement and communication with senior executives as other subcontractors neared their scheduled completion dates, just to double-check and ensure all requirements were truly met.
So constantly learning from experience, refining the process, closing those remaining gaps. And it sounds like this whole heightened emphasis on communication and collaboration even had a lasting impact on how they approach future projects.
Absolutely. The paper highlights that the positive results from the enhanced communication and information flow during this mega project's closeout directly influenced how they planned and executed subsequent construction projects.
Like how?
Well, one tangible result was the deliberate rearrangement of physical workspaces on future project sites. They started co-locating teams that were working on closely related tasks.
Physically putting them together.
Physically putting them together. The thinking was, by breaking down those physical barriers between teams, they could naturally foster more frequent face-to-face interaction and smoother information exchange, basically mirroring the success they saw during the closeout phase.
So they were literally redesigning their work environments to encourage the kind of collaboration that had proven so effective. This has been a really fascinating look at how a truly massive project tackled its complexities. But let's bring it right back to our core audience, the folks running construction companies, managing their own projects, which might be on a vastly different scale. What are the key fundamental takeaways from this case study that they can realistically apply to their own operations, regardless of the size of their company or their projects?
Yeah, that's the crucial question, isn't it? The paper makes a really compelling argument that the underlying process management system used for this mega project closeout offers a highly valuable, highly adaptable model. Construction companies of all sizes can leverage it to manage their entire operations or individual projects just more efficiently and effectively.
So the principles scale down.
Absolutely.
Mm.
The core principles we've been discussing, really understanding those interconnected processes, setting clear, measurable objectives, assigning clear ownership and accountability for processes, empowering individuals to contribute to improvements, and fostering that strong culture of open, consistent communication and collaboration. These are universally applicable. Doesn't matter if it's a $9 billion project or a $900,000 one.
So it's really about shifting your perspective. Moving from seeing a collection of isolated activities to viewing your entire construction company and each individual project as an integrated system where every part influences all the others.
Precisely. Just like companies in so many other industries have realized huge gains by defining clear systems of interrelated processes, construction companies can expect to see tangible improvements too.
Improvements where?
In key areas like lower operating costs because you're reducing waste and rework consistently higher quality output thanks to better communication and fewer errors, and significantly reduced project cycle times by streamlining workflows and getting rid of those bottlenecks. It's about consciously moving away from that traditional, often inefficient, siloed way of operating
Right.
and embracing a more integrated, more communicative, and ultimately just a more effective way of working.
Okay, so to summarize our deep dive then, we've seen how this multi-billion-dollar project successfully navigated immense complexity during its closeout. They did it by adopting a process-oriented mindset, viewing the whole thing as a system of interconnected activities. The critical success factors seem to be establishing clear goals, defining specific roles with real accountability for the entire process, empowering employees to contribute their insights for improvement, and maybe above all else, cultivating that strong culture of open, frequent, collaborative communication across every team and stakeholder involved.
And as we've explored, the really valuable lessons learned from this massive undertaking are remarkably relevant for construction companies of all sizes. By embracing a similar systematic approach, consciously focusing on how the different parts of your business or maybe a specific project interact, and really prioritizing clear and consistent communication at every single level, you can begin to effectively tackle those persistent challenges, the excessive cost, the preventable errors, and that constant erosion of your profit margins.
So, as you're listening and reflecting on your own construction company or the projects you're managing right now, I really want you to consider this. Where are those potential silos lurking within your organization or maybe out on your job sites?
Good question.
Where are the communication bottlenecks that are slowing things down or leading to misunderstandings? Are there specific areas where adopting a more process-oriented view, truly understanding those interdependencies, could unlock significant improvements in both efficiency and ultimately your profitability?
Hmm.
What's maybe one concrete first step you could take, perhaps right now or this week, to map out just one key process within your company and identify specific areas where better collaboration could yield the greatest impact?
Yeah, that first step is key.
Taking that holistic view, seeing the bigger picture and how all the pieces connect,
Hmm.
it really could be the key to truly transforming your operations and achieving consistently better outcomes across the board.